When a game is really good, a lot of the time, that makes a bunch of gamers flock right to it. But sometimes they just don't get their flowers. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 games that deserved better. Starting off with number 10, it's Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord. Where the original Mount and Blade got tons of hype and attention, the sequel has always felt a bit overlooked. Maybe it was because it took too long to come out, maybe hasn't been able to shake accusations of just being warbanned with a new coat of paint, or maybe the lack of modding support compared to previous Mount and Blade games caused it to get overlooked, I don't know, but it's a game that definitely deserves more love than it got. I'm not saying all that stuff I mentioned above isn't true, just that the final game is so good that it's easy to overlook some of the downsides. It's such an ambitious game that also manages to look incredible, and for me, that's really what stands out about Bannerlord. It takes all those ahead of their time ideas from the original game and its expansions and incorporates them into a far better looking package, and in this case, that's a big deal.
At them!
Sure, actually commanding your soldiers in battle is still kind of a mess, but seeing two armies clash in real time like this is absolutely incredible. How is this still one of the most realistic depictions of a medieval battlefield in any video game? The combat's the real highlight here. It's incredible, but the actual meat of the game is in wandering around, meeting local lords and making friends and enemies wherever you go. That's the game. There isn't a traditional story here. It's almost like a Paradox game, except you control a single character instead of a country, which might sound really complicated, but with Mount and Blade, it basically do what you want and see what happens, right? When people say it's basically just more Mount and Blade, they're not wrong, but it's vastly improved in terms of visuals, and that does add a lot to the experience. And maybe the upcoming War Sales expansion might get some more acclaim heaped on this game. It definitely deserves it. And number 9 is Returnal. Yeah, it was one of the big PS5 launch games, and it sold relatively well for what it is, but Returnal is a game that often gets overlooked when talking about the best games from PlayStation, and it deserves more than it got, because it is a fantastic game. There are a few things working against it. It's a roguelike, for one, which is a genre usually associated with indies, not AAA, 3D, beautiful-looking games like this. And each run can go often for an hour or more, which is probably just a little too long for a game like this. But if you're willing to stick with it, Returnal is one of the most satisfying and unique shooters on the PlayStation. The shooting on combat is blisteringly fast-paced and responsive. It feels like what a 3D Mega Man game could be like. Between the combat segments, they do some pretty wild stuff. Like, they have this mysterious house appear at random locations that can be explored. The boss is a real standout as well. These things are challenging as hell, but when you overcome them, it just feels incredible. It's a game that with just a super unique atmosphere. The alien world is so mysterious and ominous. It seems like it would fit with a slower-paced game, but no, you can be fast as hell in Returnal if you want. It's not very forgiving, and it's always disappointing to die after an incredible run, but it's such a fun, highly polished game. It's not too hard to tough it out through the frustration. I mean, while we're talking about Returnal, we gotta mention the real game that deserved better, Nex Machina, the game the devs made before Returnal, which is in some ways slightly better of a game. It's a brilliantly designed roguelike that's up there with the all-time greats of the genre, but it rarely ever gets mentioned. It's so obscure that I wasn't even sure about adding it to the list, but here it is. I said it, and if anything, it deserves more than Returnal. Not that Returnal doesn't. And number 8 is Hell Let Loose. This World War II hardcore multiplayer sim has never had a huge audience, but one thing I will say is its audience is consistent. There's a solid player base who have stuck with the game since it launched. With so many multiplayer shooters that end up being a flash in the pan, Hell Let Loose has survived, and for good reason, because this game is awesome. It's one of those games that appeals to a niche audience, and its hardcore mechanics focus on communication, but it's also really just great, fun to play, and it really should be getting more attention and love than it does. I'm glad it's still going. Even now, 3 years after launch, the player base is hovering around 4,000 people at any given time, which makes this game stand out from any other World War II multiplayer FPS, is its commitment to just being as real as it possibly can be. You don't have an ammo count on the HUD, you don't have a compass or objective markers. The most you'll get is some markers that point out teammates when they're close by. Most of the time, a single shot out of nowhere just gonna kill you. The maps in this game, absolutely huge. They can have up to 100 players vying for objectives at once. You got 6-man squads, smaller scout squads, and tank crews, unlike other games like Battlefield, where you actually need a full crew to properly cooperate. The driver is separate from the gunner, and nobody can really see anything other than the tank commander, who are the only ones with a full 360-degree view, so you have to communicate with your team to get anywhere on a tank. There's also the whole RTS metagame going on as well, where holding territory generates resources that can be used by the game's general to assist with stuff like airstrikes. It's a complex game with a lot of moving parts, but if you're just a regular soldier willing to communicate, you'll have, not a lot of trouble muddling along just fine. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Hell let loose, it can be really challenging and unforgiving. You can go for an hour never getting a single kill, but sometimes the stars align, you get lucky, and you mow down multiple guys at once. There's long segments of downtime where you're just traveling from one part of the map to another, but when things heat up, the intensity of the action is really just unlike anything else. Of course, there will be a lot of dying out of nowhere, but if you go in with the expectation that you're not going to be 360 no-scoping all over the place, then there's some serious fun to be had here. The community's still around, and they're really friendly from my experience, so check it out. It deserves way more attention than it has. At number 7 is Lost Odyssey. This is from Mistwalker, came out way back in 2007. It's an Xbox 360 exclusive, and while it's got a small but dedicated fan base to this day, this game definitely got overlooked at the time and deserves to be recognized as an important stepping stone to where we are now with JRPGs. After Clair Obscur, it's clear there's a market for these experiences and a more grown-up audience, and that's essentially what Lost Odyssey was made for. It jettisoned the usual cliche anime teenage protagonist for a grown man and a cast of mostly adult characters in what's a more serious and somber game than you usually see in RPGs. The production values are excellent, and it's really cinematic even by today's standards. Even the battle system, it's nothing incredible, but it's good. The game's music, design, story, they really carry it, though. They leave a lasting impression on the rare few that actually played it. In many ways, it's the next generation Final Fantasy game we never got. While the actual Final Fantasy games were busy with weird experiments like Final Fantasy XIII, Lost Odyssey felt more like a true continuation of the series, with its globe-trotting plot and traditional turn-based system. That's part of the reason, I think, why the game was overlooked at the time. The standard RPG was on the outs, and the audience just wasn't there. The gaming world is a very different place now. There's room for classic throwbacks, as long as they're able to tell compelling stories and do unique things. Lost Odyssey does that. Its most memorable feature is actually its least flashy. The 1,000 Years of Dreaming segments that occasionally appear as you progress through the game are simply text over background, but the quality of the writing really makes it stand out. Lost Odyssey isn't a bunch of sad text on the screen, though. It's a thrilling and fun RPG in its own right. And number 6 is Prototype. This game was pretty big at the time. I remember the intense flame wars that raged over which was better, Prototype or Infamous. And while the Infamous games, I think, do get their due respect, I'm not sure I really think the first one gets what it deserves. It's kind of fallen by the wayside. I get it. They're very much a product of their time. They're creepy and nasty and over-the-top violent in a way that I'm not sure it would be as easy to get away with now, with graphics getting to a point where they can be pretty near photorealistic. I'm not saying they're photorealistic, but they're pretty damn close. Close enough. If you just accept these games as they are, though, then at some point they're some of the most fun and innovative open-world games out there. The concept alone is brilliant. It's The Thing, only open world and you're the alien. You're also crazy acrobatic, and you can move around the world with a combination of gliding and parkour, and that's some of the most satisfying open world crap of all time. It's up there with Spider-Man's swing mechanics. In fact, kind of grew out of it. Combat is refreshingly visceral and old school in how it's mostly combo-based rather than being yet another variation of Arkham combat. But what makes it truly great is how many powers and abilities you have access to. So many games are now obsessed with balance that they rarely give you a lot of fun stuff to mess around with. But Prototype just throws all that out the window and gives you as many cool and interesting powers as you can imagine. Unlocking new abilities is just as fun, if not more fun, than actually progressing the plot, and just running around and causing chaos is one of those simple joys that the game absolutely revels in. The sequel isn't as good, but it still has good stuff in it. It's, in particular, like being able to create makeshift weapons from vehicles. It's a feature they originally came up with in Hulk Ultimate Destruction. In reality, the Prototype games are spiritual successors to that Hulk game, and it kind of deserves more respect too. It's honestly one of the best licensed superhero games ever made, and rarely gets brought up when you're talking about that sort of thing. But Prototype is probably an overall better game, and a lot of the times just forgotten about. At number 5 is Legend of Grimrock 2. It might seem like an out there pick, but this game really is just that good and deserves more than it seemingly got. It was a dungeon crawler released back in 2014. It's a lot more than it seems. Yes, it is a dungeon crawler, but it's also part Metroidvania, part open world puzzle game, and it is more than the sum of its parts. It's fantastic. Rather than being confined to a bunch of generic stone hallways like most games like this, Grimrock 2 gives you an entire massive island to explore in a non-linear way. It's got challenging obstacles and tons of secrets hidden all over the place. It's a challenging game too. There's a lot of enemies in this game, and they will destroy any unprepared party if you wander in the wrong direction. So some pretty devious puzzles as well. The game came out just before the CRPG started to come back into prominence, and well before something like Baldur's Gate 3, so in some ways it's overlooked because it doesn't fit into the usual RPG mold, but the game is every bit as deep and complex as you could want, with a massive and fascinating world that is worth exploring. It feels almost like a precursor to Elden Ring of all things. It's a smaller game by a lot, but the sense of discovery feels really, really similar. It's a real shame because while Legend of Grimrock feels like a true evolution of the dungeon crawler genre, it also feels like after 10 years there's really been no successor to it. No other first-person dungeon game has even come close to being as big, varied, or as complex and challenging as Legend of Grimrock. It's a game all by itself that really hasn't been surpassed after all these years. At number 4 is God Hand, another true original. God Hand was mostly ignored and panned by the reviewers back when it first came out. Over the years, though, its legend has grown at least a little bit. This was the game that killed Clover. Well, this along with Okami underperforming. But while Okami rightly has been hailed as the classic it is, God Hand continues to fly under the radar. It's another one of those games that there's really just nothing else like it. There's elements in other games that are like it, but it stands alone as its own unique thing. You do have to get past the goofy plot and the basic visuals. It launched as a budget game back in the PS2 era. Even for Clover, it was kind of an afterthought. But if you get past all that, you got one of the most mechanically intense beat-em-ups of all time. It's Devil May Cry, but it's also Final Fight. Actually, just a bizarre mix of both with a little Resident Evil for seasoning. God Hand was one of the first straight action games to embrace the behind-the-shoulder camera that the God of War reboot would eventually adopt, and while the combat was all hand-to-hand, with the occasional pick-up weapon found in the environment, the big difference is how challenging the game can be. Along with combos you can put together yourself and amusingly powerful special abilities, there's a couple of ways to dodge. Like, there's a standard action game get out of the way dodge and a punch-out style sway in different directions, which is a lot riskier but can pay back huge as it gives you immediately continuation of your combo after you do that dodge successfully. Obviously, if you mess it up, it's not going to work. Taken all together, it's one of the most unique fighting systems I've ever seen in a game, and one I wish somebody would have taken and expanded on at some point, but that never really happened. There are games that play kind of like God Hand, like Sifu, for example, but there's nothing that quite matches the game's complex yet really satisfying combat system. The difficulty system is also worth mentioning. If you do well, then the difficulty eventually does go up. It makes enemies more aggressive and hit harder, and if you play poorly, difficulty drops. It's an interesting system that keeps things intense, maybe a bit too intense, actually. But, I mean, I like it. However, it probably scared away a lot of players. It's not quite as harsh as it first appears, though. And people love tough games these days anyhow, so dying a lot is a positive, if anything, right? Like, God Hand's bizarre, and yeah, it's kind of ugly, but it's so uniquely fun, it deserves a second look. And number 3 is Astral Chain. When people talk about the good Platinum games, you get the usual suspects: Bayonetta, Vanquish, Metal Gear Rising, even stuff like Mad World and Wonderful 101. But one game that always seems to get overlooked is Astral Chain. Maybe because it was a Switch exclusive, maybe because the premise isn't as flashy as some of their other games, but Astral Chain deserves as much, if not more, attention because it's probably the most consistently high-quality game they put out in, quite a while. I guess I could possibly say that about Bayonetta Origins. It's another severely underrated game from the studio, but that one is so overlooked and different from the rest of their output, it's hard to justify. Well, Astral Chain fits right in. It's an action game. It's full of over-the-top moments and crazy cutscenes. The actual action is crisp as hell and satisfying, and mechanically it's quite complex without being overwhelming. And the Wonderful 101 kind of was overwhelming for a lot of players. I will admit this game does have a few slow bits in my mind, but they do a good job breaking up the action, in my opinion. It's a little longer and sometimes has a little more leisurely pace compared to the breakneck insanity of their other games, but that actually suits this one pretty well. It builds up its mechanics naturally and gives players time to really learn what's going on before moving on to the new stuff. The whole chain mechanic where you control a creature independently from your character is really creative. It's also tricky and fun to use once you master it.
That's a Legion. Hard weapon, hard partner. It saved my ass plenty of times.
Oh, okay. Oh, this is so weird. It's like I'm feeling everything it feels.
Even the plot, though, is less of a mess than you usually get from Platinum. It's seriously one of their best games, but it's often overlooked to focus on past glories or recent failures. The game is pretty recent, and it was actually a success for the company, selling over 1 million copies, but it's generally overlooked, and it really shouldn't be. And number 2 is Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, one of Arcane Studios' earliest games. Might be honestly pretty janky. It's one of the strangest and most unnecessary franchise connections. Seriously, they took Might and Magic, which were dungeon crawlers, top-down turn-based strategy games, and turned it into a first-person shooter. Should have been a disaster, but Arcane, they made a cult classic. It's that simple. What makes it so memorable is, what they do best, the immersive sim elements. You can kick enemies off ledges or into the many spike walls that are seemingly all over the place.
You won't make it. Die.
There's spells you can use to manipulate the world and reach normally inaccessible places. You can sneak. You can just fight. You can progress however you really want, in most cases, at least. I think the game doesn't generally force you into one specific way to progress. It's been a while, and it's still a linear game, but I remember it being pretty well non-linear for, what it was. How you go about dealing with the various enemies. It's up to you. When people talk about immersive sims, the true classics of the genre get mentioned, but Dark Messiah is often conspicuously absent, even though it really kept the fire burning for immersive sims during that fallow period where PC-focused games were on the decline. It's not a perfect game by any stretch, but it is a very fun one, and that makes up for a lot. When it comes to kicking things into bottomless pits, the game is still one of the best. I don't know what it is about the kick in this game that's so satisfying. Maybe the ragdoll physics add a lot to it. I don't know, but it just works. It's because of this game walking that games like Dying Light could run. Also, that Angerfoot could kick, truthfully. It's definitely rough around the edges, but the magic and stealth and the kicking are just so much fun. It deserves a ton of recognition. And finally, at number 1, it's Jet Set Radio Future. This all-time classic really deserves a remake, a remaster, or some kind of re-release because it's one of the all-time great Xbox exclusives, and it's almost impossible to play nowadays through normal means. It's unfortunate because it's an all-time great Sega game. It's right up there with the original Jet Set Radio, which is significantly more accessible these days. What makes this game so great is how timeless it feels. Like, same goes for Jet Set Radio, not future, present, Jet Set Radio present, I guess. The first Jet Set Radio game. They're both pretty timeless looking. They ooze that same sense of style they had back then. It looks incredible. It feels avant-garde and kind of subversive even now, which is incredible for a game that's old enough to drink. The visuals just hold up, period. They're a little better than the first game, a little more polygons, not a lot. I think a lot more polygons would actually possibly be to its detriment. It's got that highly stylized, cel-shaded look that just wouldn't look out of place in an indie game today. The soundtrack's still amazing, the futuristic Tokyo levels are so much fun to skate around in.
Ladies and gentlemen, who wants the hardcore? 5 wants 4.
The name of the game is Graffiti. You're going around tagging every available surface while avoiding the cops. And the more futuristic setting makes for more expansive and fantastical things going on. It's an extreme sports game combined with a platformer, kind of, and also has combat, kind of. I don't know. It's all really fun. It all comes together well. And it's crazy when they start throwing robots and mechs at you. It's just a really good, goofy, and really fun game. That's a prime example of why the original Xbox was the true successor to the Dreamcast in a lot of ways. Sega did some amazing work on that system, and Jet Set Radio Future probably is their crown jewel. With the reboot apparently still coming sometime in the future, maybe it'll finally get the reevaluation and fingers crossed, re-release of some kind it deserves. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter, Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on Gameranx.